Good morning. Don't be sad. I know this is our last day together for a while, but we're going to have a great last day this week as we look at the Bible together. So cheer up. And in case you happen to hail from Rwanda, Muraho, Mwaramutseneza. Want you to feel greeted too. So let's dive into the Word. Luke 19, verses 45 to 48. Short story, big meaning. And this story, verses 45 to 48, this scene from the life of Christ, let's just say it's shocking. It would have sent shockwaves rippling throughout Jerusalem. It would have appeared on the front page the very next day of the Jerusalem Times and the Holy Herald. It would have been the buzz of Jerusalem. Everyone would have been talking about what Jesus did. Okay, what did Jesus do? Well, he cleared the temple. He drove out the merchants, the money changers, and he tried to institute again a reverence for the temple and for worship. If you remember, this is how Jesus began his ministry 3 years ago. He went to the temple, John chapter 2, fashioned a cord out of ropes, fashioned a whip, and then he drove out the bazaar, basically. Well, 3 years later, nothing had changed. Man was still corrupt. The temple was still corrupt. Profiteering was still rampant. Greed was pervasive. And it was all happening in the temple, the site of worship. So Jesus, again, on Tuesday, before he dies on Friday, on this Tuesday, Jesus does something shocking. Walks back into the temple complex, and he begins to drive out the merchants and the money changers and the animals. See, he's filled with divine rage that they would turn God's house into a market. And just so you know, when Jesus walked into the temple that day, it was Passover week, right? There would have been thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in the temple. See, Jerusalem would fill with as many as 2 million Jews. So the city was massively packed. And the temple would have been jammed with people buying animals for the sacrifice, buying items for offering, exchanging money. There would have been the sounds of animals, the smell of animals and bodies. It would have been a wild scene, jammed with people. So Jesus walks in and unleashes havoc. You might say, well, what is he doing? I thought these guys were providing a legitimate service, giving animals or providing animals for sacrificers or exchanging currency so people could purchase the items needed for worship. Well, no. See, this temple operation had become big business. And the merchants, they paid a fee. They paid some of their profits to the priests who controlled the temple and made gobs of money. But these merchants and money changers, well, the merchants for animals charged about 10 times the regular price for an animal. And the money changers, they charged at least a 25% fee to exchange currency. So they were bilking these worshipers. And the worshipers had nothing to do because, listen, this is the temple. Where else are you going to go? The priests controlled it. And so this was a group of greedy, unscrupulous businessmen. They weren't there to promote worship. They were there to fatten their wallets. And so Jesus is infuriated by this. And his divine rage unleashes divine power as somehow, and imagine this, how does one man drive out hundreds, maybe thousands of merchants and all of their animals? Like, how does he drive them out? How is it that 10 guys don't just pounce on him and boom, chaos over, order restored, business as usual? Well, I don't know. Text doesn't say. We get to ask Jesus when we get there. To heaven, that is. But we know that Jesus drove them all out. And what was his authority for doing this? Or what was the basis for this? Well, he gives us two texts. Isaiah 56:7 and Jeremiah 7:11. And he fuses them together when he says, verse 46, "My house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a robber's den." You see, this market was taking place in the court of the Gentiles, which is where the Gentiles were supposed to worship God. They couldn't go elsewhere in the temple. There was actually a sign saying, hey, if you go past this point, Gentiles, we're going to execute you. Well, so the Jews had turned the court of the Gentiles into a marketplace, a bazaar, and it was meant to be a place for prayer, meant to be a place for the nations to come and seek the true God, worship the true God, pray to the true God. But the Jews corrupted that. And so Jesus is furious that they would debase the temple, debase worship of God for money. And so he says, this is why I'm doing it. I'm acting in the interest of God, not your wallet. So the Son of God was filled with the anger of God, and he drove out the enemies of God, so that the true worshipers of God could pray to God. And then he does something phenomenal. Verse 47, he preaches daily in the temple, which means he's preaching the gospel after this, day by day by day, preaching the gospel. The guilty ones were gone, and now the ones remaining were those who wanted to hear truth, who were interested in truth. And he preaches the gospel. Now, how do you think the religious leaders reacted to this? The ones whose temple operations were being hampered by this wild man Jesus. Well, you don't have to wonder. Verse 47 says they were trying to destroy him. They hated Jesus. He was costing them big bucks. I mean, they had always hated Jesus, but even more because he was impacting their finances. So they were trying to destroy him, to catch him so they could kill him. But verse 48, the opportunity wasn't there because the people were hanging on to every word he said. See, the people were gobbling up his words. They were listening to this amazing preacher, Jesus. So the religious rulers had no opportunity to get rid of him. Which, of course, we know why. Because Jesus had a date with the cross. He had to die. So God couldn't permit the leaders to kill Jesus beforehand because he needed to die on a Roman cross. Because the salvation of mankind depended on it. And aren't you glad that he did?